Welcome to this online advanced training module sponsored by the Institute of Education Sciences. My name is Rob Horner, and in collaboration with Dr. Wendy Mihalacek from the University of Oregon, I have developed the content of this module. We're going to focus on research questions, the development and the use of research questions. This module should take approximately 20 minutes. There are 5 evaluation questions at the end, and part of what we're doing is using this module as an element of the larger Institute on Single Case Research Methods that IES has sponsored. The purpose of this particular module stems from recommendations that grant reviewers and journal editors have given on the need to produce research questions that have adequate precision. The message we've gotten is that too often research questions are offered globally in their form and in a way that is insufficiently helpful in terms of guiding both readers and definitely grant reviewers. So the major purposes of this module are, one, to increase the precision of research questions and the value of those questions to guide single case research, and to improve the effectiveness of grant applicants as they are preparing grant proposals for submission to IES. Going through this module, you'll end up with 2 key outcomes. One is you should be able to write research questions that include 4 critical features. Part of what we want is when you look at a research question, you should be able to answer 4 questions, and those 4 questions are related to the critical features. The second is linking research questions and the actual methodology and results of a single case designed study. One of the critical outcomes is you should be able to look at a graph and from that graph infer the critical features of what the research question looked like. So let's delve instantly into the meat. 4 features. Research questions should allow any reader or reviewer to answer 4 or identify 4 elements of what the research will involve. The first is clearly defining what the dependent variable is. A research question targets what is the valued outcome, what is going to be measured, what is really the focus of the study. The second is the research question should indicate the independent variable, not globally, but specifically. It should be clear this is the variable that would be manipulated or will be manipulated by the research team to assess its impact on the dependent variable. Most researchers are very good at building in the independent and dependent variable. The 2 pieces that are often missing. One, indicate in the research question that the study you're proposing is experimental in nature. We use in single case research the language of assessing a functional relation. Looking at a functional relation means that the research is not just descriptive or correlational, but is actually going to be assessing a causal relation. We're going to be looking at the ability to discard the likelihood that other uncontrolled variables may have affected a relationship that shows up. Indicate that the study will be experimental, and in the best case, define in the research question the type and predicted level of change that is anticipated. So in a single case study, are the researchers expecting change in the level of performance? Are you expecting, for example, the rate of problem behavior to decrease? Or are you expecting the ability of a student who's learning a physical skill to improve? Or is the difference not just level but trend? So is the trend of oral reading fluency over time what you're really focused on? You can also, especially with certain dependent variables, some physiological, some behavioral, it's not just level or trend, but it's actually decreasing the variability that you're seeing. It is also often helpful, and in some cases implied, other cases explicitly stated, that the change that's expected will happen either immediately or in a delayed manner. So there are four key elements of an effective research question: the dependent variable, the independent variable, documentation of a functional relation, which indicates that it's an experimental design, and description of the variable and predicted direction of change in the dependent variable. Take a look. So here are some examples in which to put this combined those four elements. So here's a research question. Is there a functional relation between reading fluency instruction and increased level of scores on reading comprehensive assessments? So if we were to go through the four things we're looking for, reading comprehension is the dependent variable. The study is focused on improving the ability with which students are able to read and understand what they're reading. The independent variable is reading fluency instruction. So we are going to expect some curricular design that focuses on reading fluency instruction. By documenting that we're looking at a functional relation, it informs both reviewers, readers, and other researchers that this will be an experimental design. And what you're looking for is increase in the level of the reading comprehension scores. This would be a precise research question. Now flip that around and go through an exercise with me. Think about writing a research question. In this case, let's look at a question in which the area of study is the physical walking, the gait of children who have muscle problems that create gait imbalance. We're going to say we have a measure of gait precision. The Gait Precision Index, GPI, is a measure of the extent to which a child is walking with a typical gait. Now, the independent variable, in this case, is training in which the child walks in water. And the hypothesis is that the proprioceptive feedback and the opportunity to walk without falling allows an integration of the muscle control necessary to improve walking. Write a precise research question given just the content that I've given you. Take 15 seconds and then look for the four elements that we've been talking about. All right, now compare what you've just written with this. So here's a possible research question. Is there a functional relation between water walking training and improved gait as measured by increased GPI score for children with gait imbalance? So in this case, the dependent variable is indicated, the independent variable is defined, the functional relation demonstrates that this will be an experimental design. We're looking for increased GPI scores, and oftentimes people like to include for whom, children with gait imbalance. We're not including that as a critical variable, but it's a nice piece that adds to the precision. The basic idea is, rather than focusing on research questions that are very global in structure, focus on research questions that have a level of precision that is much more helpful both to readers of journal articles and readers of grant applications. Try the same structure again in terms of writing and looking at a research question, but in this case, let me give you a question and have you identify dependent variable, independent variable, function relation, and expected pattern. So read this research question. Is there a functional relation between use of escape extinction and reduction in the level of escape-motivated food refusal? This is a study that many people who work with children with severe disabilities and applied behavior analysis will recognize. Food refusal is the behavior of not eating. And with some children with significant disabilities, food refusal can actually become a significant physical danger for the children. The strategy, or a strategy, that has been used successfully is a protocol called escape extinction. So that's a strategy that has been used. So given that information, look at this research question. Where's the dependent variable? Where's the independent variable? How do you know if this is experimental or not? And what's the expected pattern? Part of what we'd hope at this point, you'd say escape-motivated food refusal is the dependent variable. Escape extinction is the independent variable. Clearly it's experimental in nature, and we're looking for reduction in the level. Not complicated, but the number of research questions that we look at that do not include these four features is high. All right, so let's build fluency at this same basic idea. Take a look at some research questions and start talking about first what's missing and then how they might be changed. So this question reads, the study will provide a systematic analysis of the reduction in the rate of stuttering by adolescents. Perfectly typical, but how would it be needed to alter? What are the things, for example, of the four elements, what's missing? In this case, both the independent variable and the documentation that you're going to have an experimental design are missing. Do the same thing with this research question. What's missing? Compare this with what you actually have. Doesn't indicate functional relation, doesn't indicate the pattern that we'd be looking for. It does indicate both the independent and dependent variable. Consider how you might actually change questions. So write a precise research question that is addressing this issue of whether functional communication training affects problem behavior. How would you write a research question? Take 12 seconds. Write a research question that includes the four key features. All right, compare what you wrote with something like this. Is there a functional relation between implementation of functional communication training and reduction in the level and intensity of problem behavior? Note that in this case, the pattern is defined both as level change and as intensity change. Those would result in expecting two different measures of the dependent variable. Do it again. Do it again, only this time do it faster. Do it in 10 seconds. Okay, compare what you wrote with this. Is there a functional relation between instruction using time-delayed prompting and the speed and precision of self-help skill acquisition by young children with severe intellectual disabilities? So in part, coming up with precise questions has value, it has interest, and it is something that has been useful both in communicating to collaborators, communicating to people who are reading your work, and communicating with journal reviewers. Now, the second part of what we wanted to focus on is looking at the relationship between the research question and the presentation of results for single case designs. If you look at these two designs, for example, part of what we want to argue is that you can interpret and infer what the research question is in many ways by looking at the elements of the design. Take study A. If you want to look for the independent variable, you typically look at the phase change labels. So this is a study looking at the manipulation of whether functional behavioral assessment was being used in the phase. So baseline would be without FBA. The coaching phase is introduction of the FBA. This is using an intervention based on functional behavioral assessment. This is using an intervention without functional behavioral assessment. This would be using the intervention with functional behavioral assessment. So the independent variable is manipulation of interventions based on functional behavioral assessment. The dependent variable is always listed in the vertical axis, so it's percent of intervals, in this case, of problem behavior. So the single subject research question would be, is there a functional relation between use of interventions based on a functional behavioral assessment and decrease in the percent of 10-second intervals with problem behavior? Look at study B. What is the independent variable in study B? Implementation of the good behavior game. What is the dependent variable? In this case, percent of 10-second intervals with problem behavior. So again, one of the things that you would be expected to do is to say, from simply looking at this design, I can infer what the research question is. Is there a functional relation between implementation of the good behavior game and decrease in the proportion or percent of 10-second intervals with problem behavior? The questions asked here, which study includes the good behavior game? Clearly, study B. What was the dependent variable for study A? Percent of 10-second intervals with problem behavior. Now, use that information and actually write the research question for the study below. What is the research question posed in this study? For those of you who do not do academic instruction, this is a study that is focused on the impact of instructional strategies on problem behavior. And one of the variables that is being manipulated is the extent to which the content of the instruction is at the level that the student is able to perform at least 80% of the items correct. Or is the content of instruction so difficult that the student is below 50% or 40% of correct responses at what would be called frustration level? The hypothesis is that when students are presented instructional strategies with content that's at the frustration level, they fail and fail, the instruction becomes aversive, and it increases the likelihood that they'll engage in escape maintain problem behavior. When they are presented with instructional material that's at the instruction level, the likelihood that they succeed goes up, and the likelihood that they will engage in active involvement without problem behavior improves. So given that information, take 15 seconds and write the research question. All right, compare your research question to this. Is there a functional relation between instruction level placement and reduction in the level of problem behavior during instruction? There are a wide array of ways that you could have written your research question. Some will have said comparing instruction level versus frustration level. That would be perfectly fine. It's not that there's only one way to do it. It's that the research question you've written allows you to identify dependent variable, independent variable, the fact that it's an experimental design looking for a functional relation, right? And the ability to say, what's the pattern that's being expected?